What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the Pika Pika Papa, and in yesterday's video, we did one of my favorite regular monthly series videos that I think give us the best indication of understanding what is hot and what is happening at the macro level of the hobby. And by that, I mean, we looked at the actual grading volume from PSA. We looked at the most graded cards, the most graded sets, the most graded characters. And for me, that tells you where the hobby is focused right now. Even if you don't care about slabs, even if you hate PSA, the grading volume at PSA is such that you simply can't ignore it. If you are spending money in the Pokemon space with the hopes that whatever you're buying is going to appreciate in value over time, you have to pay attention to these numbers, and I always enjoy bringing it to you. Now, last month, we saw something happen in the PSA grading space, specifically in the TCG arena, that I won't say I never thought would happen, but the pace at which these numbers are being hit absolutely blows my mind. So what I want you to look at right now on the screen in front of you is the chart that we looked at yesterday. Now, this represents the number of TCG cards graded at PSA by month. And you can see I have a red line that goes up and down starting in February of 2025. The reason I have it there is because that is when the grading volume in the TCG space at PSA took a step function change. It didn't just increase, it leapt forward in terms of overall volume. If you look at 2023 and 2024, again, each blue line going up and down represents the grading volume for the corresponding month. And you can see 570, 580,000, those were all-time highs, about 500,000 cards per month. We're right where we were trending at in 2023 and 2024. Then in February of 2025, the number of TCG cards graded jumped up to about 725,000. Then 2 months after that, it jumped up to 951,000. And then we spent 4 or 5 months where 800,000 was the bottom. Most months were right around 1 million. And then last month we saw, this is just crazy to say, last month at PSA, there was 1.226 million TCG cards graded at PSA. And the whole reason I'm doing this video today is because we all have to understand, and again, it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just the thing, but we have to understand that the number of cards that we love in PSA 10 holders is going to be fundamentally higher in the Scarlet Violet era than we've ever seen before. So in today's video, we're going to look at the top 8 Sword and Shield chase cards and the top 8 Scarlet and Violet chase cards. We're going to look at their PSA 10 population, PSA 9 population, raw card price, PSA 10 card price. We're going to look at ratios and all kinds of things, because I think it's very important to understand where Sword and Shield is now versus where Scarlet and Violet is now, because there is going to be, like I said, a huge difference in terms of the overall grading volume. And when it comes down to driving the price of a Pokemon card, whether it's in a slab, or whether it's raw, or even whether it's a sealed product, the only thing that drives that price is supply and demand. And right now, throughout the course of 2025, supply and demand has been totally out of whack, right? That's why you can't find anything at MSRP, because they haven't printed enough. And when it is available at MSRP, it sells out instantly. And then scalpers price it on the internet for 2 to 3x MSRP. They make some money on it. But that will change. That will flatten out. Either demand will go down, supply will increase, but it will balance at some point in time. But what will not change is the number of cards in population in PSA 10 holders. Once they're encapsulated, they are pretty much there forever. So think about this. Sealed product is ever decreasing in terms of population. People are always opening sealed product. There are even first edition 1999 base set booster boxes that are opened every single year. That is why sealed is a very safe investment. That's why it generally appreciates over time. And a lot of times when some of these older products or even some of the newer products are open, people are trying to get very, very minty raw cards. And what do they do with these minty raw cards from these sealed products that they've opened? A lot of times they're sending them off to PSA. So while the sealed population is decreasing, the overall PSA 10, PSA 9 graded population is usually increasing. It's an inverse relationship. So it's very, very interesting. And we need to keep our finger on the pulse of all of this as we approach this hobby into the foreseeable future. So again, none of this is a bad thing. None of this is a good thing. It's just a thing we need to be made aware of. And I think some of the numbers and data we're going to talk about today is really eye-opening. So before I get into that, before we start looking at all these charts and stuff, I got to give my selfish plug. We do a ton of work behind the scenes here. I hope it shines through in this video today. If you enjoy it, if you're having fun, listen, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those two things go a very long way in helping my small channel out, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So the first thing we're going to look at right here. So these are the actual, what I consider the top 8 chase cards from the Scarlet and Violet era. And as I said, we have a couple different data points here. So obviously on the left, I have the card name, then I have the set, then Then we have the PSA 10 population, the PSA 9 population, and then I did this 10 versus 9 rate, right? So what I did was basically I added up the total number of PSA 10s and PSA 9s and figured out what percentage of that total number of 9s and 10s resulted in a PSA 10 grade, which gives us a bit of a ratio, right? It goes to show you how truly rare those PSA 10s are. Then I've got the PSA 10 price, I've got the raw card price, and then to the right, I have the raw versus PSA, and these are all the things that we're going to be talking about here. So the raw versus PSA, if you look at the Magikarp card, right, the raw card price is $285. The PSA 10 price is $2,073. So if you take 285 and you multiply it by 7.3, what does that give you? That gives you 2,073. So it is just the ratio of raw card to PSA 10 pricing. Now, I put some yellow boxes up on the screen because what I wanted to call out here, and which is really, really fascinating to me, is some things that are going to be fundamentally different here in the Scarlet and Violet era versus the Sword and Shield era. So the first thing that you're going to notice is the 10 versus 9 rate is relatively low. Most of the ones on here are below the 40% mark, with the exception of several, right? You've got the Mew, which is up at 43, you've got the Greninja, which is up at 53, and then you got the Lily's Clefairy, which is the highest at 65% there. And when you look at the raw versus PSA, you will notice that the lower the ratio of 10s versus 9s, you see the Magikarp is the loss leader there with only 25%. You will see it has the higher ratio of the raw card versus the PSA 10 price. We talk about that a lot on this channel. When I am hunting for cards when they first come out, I am always looking for pull rates, and I'm trying to get the earliest read I can on gem rates because that has a huge, huge impact on how these prices are going to move on the long run. If you have a big name Pokemon from an awesome set with a really bad pull rate and a really bad gem rate, that card is going to absolutely crush over time. So that is what we try and pay attention to here on this channel a whole lot. And the other thing that I have highlighted there in red is just the overall PSA 10 population. And on the next slide, we're going to look at Sword and Shield, but what I want to take away from this is think about these sets are still relatively new in the grand scheme of things. I understand Scarlet and Violet is over. I understand we're into the Mega Series, but still, in the grand scheme of the Pokemon world, like these Scarlet and Violet sets are still in their infancy. So when you look at the overall PSA 10 population, and especially if you look at the PSA 10 plus the PSA 9 pop, like some of these numbers are insane. There has been over 60,000 of those Charizards from 151 sent in for grading, right? When you look at the Mew, there's been over 30,000 of those Bubble Mews from Paldean Fates sent in for grading. Like even the Magikarp, right? There's been over 14,000 of those sent in. The Pikachu from Surging Sparks. Surging Sparks is just 1 year old, for goodness sakes, and there's been over 17,000 of those Pikachus from Surging Sparks sent into PSA for grading. And we're going to talk about this more in a minute, but I just want you to keep that top of mind as we go to the next slide and we look at some of these Sword and Shield chase cards. Now, a lot of times in my videos, I'll walk away at the end with some kind of learning or some kind of trend or something that I'm like, hey, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a very strong indication the market's moving in this direction. In terms of this is more of a conversation. I don't really have a good finger on the pulse of what I think is going to happen next. But again, understanding this as far as I'm concerned, especially if you love PSA graded cards like I do, I think is really, really important because some of these prices are really, really high. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens as the supply and demand curve starts to flatten out and as these PSA 10 populations continue to increase. So the best comparison is right here. Again, we are looking at the Sword and Shield, what I consider to be the top 8 chase cards. Now, what I did was I made sure that each of these is from different sets. Obviously, for Evolving Skies, you could have 3 different chase cards from Evolving Skies, but I wanted to have one from each set because each set has different pull rates. Each set, has different rarity and all that good stuff. So I just wanted to use the top one from each set. But again, when you look at this, and again, I have this highlighted in the yellow boxes, and this is not surprising to anybody, but first off, the 10 versus 9 rate in the Sword and Shield era is infinitely higher than it was in the Scarlet and Violet. If you look at the very bottom where it says 63%, like the average of all of these is 63%. The average of all of them in the Scarlet and Violet era was 42%. So much, much lower, much, much harder to get those PSA 10s in Scarlet and Violet than it was in Sword and Shield. And as you look to the right, the raw versus PSA, the same pattern emerges, right? The lower the 10 versus 9 rate where you see there, you have the higher raw versus PSA. And again, all of this just makes sense. None of this is like secret math that we had to work hard on in the background. None of this is something nobody couldn't conceptualize on their own. Like it all makes all the sense in the world. But because the broader market in the Sword and Shield era was much easier to get those PSA 10s, we see the ratio between the raw cards and the PSA 10 prices is much, much tighter. Now, the population is another one. When you look at this, the most graded card, or the one with the most submissions from the Sword and Shield era, is that Lugia from Silver Tempest. And when you look at it, it is just shy of 25,000. Now remember some of the numbers that I was throwing out earlier for Scarlet and Violet. Remember the Bubble Mew, we already have over 30,000 of those submitted. Remember, you know, the 151 Charizard, we have over 60,000 of those submitted. And when you talk about these cards from Sword and Shield, these amazing cards, these awesome alt arts, the ones that everybody went after, Sword and Shield is such a phenomenal era. Everybody loves Sword and Shield. And when you think about all of that, these PSA 10 populations are absolutely infinitesimal compared to what we were seeing in those Scarlet and Violets. I mean, the next biggest one I see is going to be the Charizard from Brilliant Stars, which is coming in at about 25,000. And then you've got what, the Gengar from Fusion Strike coming in just shy of 20,000. So when you think about that, plus remember the age, these cards are much, much older. So very interesting stuff to take away. Very interesting to see how all of that transpired. But now let's look at them side by side. Let's stack rank them, okay? So in this slide right here, across the top, I've got the Sword and Shield, and across the bottom, I've got the Scarlet and Violet. And for me, the biggest takeaways are here. So I've got a yellow box, a blue box, and I've got a red box over here. Think about Sword and Shield. The average Sword and Shield set that's featured here is about 3 to 4.5 years old at this point. And even with it being 3 to 4.5 years old, the total population, if you were to add up all the PSA 10s right there for all 8 of those cards, it would be 92,438. Now, look at Scarlet and Violet, right? The average there is half a year old, right? We have Destined Rivals included in there, right? And then the oldest one is going to be Paldea Evolved, which is right around 2.5 years old. And yet, if you were to add up all of those PSA 10 populations, it comes to 68,201. I would not be surprised at all if we did this video 2 years from now, okay, when we let Scarlet and Violet kind of age and catch up, if the total PSA 10 populations didn't double over that course of time. Like, it would just absolutely not surprise me at all if we saw that reach 136, 140,000 in terms of PSA 10 population, and it would just far outpace the PSA 10 population that we have seen for Sword and Shield. So for me, that's something very, very important to keep top of mind. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting is there are 4 Sword and Shield cards out of these top 8 with a PSA 10 price point over $1,000 right now. Yet in Scarlet and Violet, the much newer era, with the population growing at a much faster rate in that PSA 10, right? Because again, more Sword and Shield, or excuse me, more Scarlet and Violet is obviously being opened right now. Newer series, lots of stuff still available. So more of those are being opened. So I would expect the PSA 10 population of those cards to grow at a much, much, much faster rate than we're going to see in Sword and Shield moving forward. And even with all that, there are 6 cards from the Scarlet and Violet era in a PSA 10 holder that are over $1,000. So 6 of the 8 cards that we have featured here are over $1,000. The only ones that are below is that Greninja from Twilight Masquerade, and it's almost there. It's at $944 in a PSA 10 holder. And then Lily's Clefairy, one of the newer sets that's featured on here, at $629 in a PSA 10 holder. All of the other ones are up over $1,000, which is absolutely crazy to think about. And then, of course, in the blue box, we have the raw versus PSA ratio right there. And again, it's much tighter in Sword and Shield because, again, the ratio was much greater, which means that they were much easier to get PSA 10. So the raw card price versus the PSA 10 price is much closer. And then in Scarlet and Violet, you see that it's a little bit higher because the PSA 10 rates were much, much lower. But when I stop and think about this, it's going to be interesting to me. And again, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't possibly conceptualize all of this. But as I think about the ever-increasing Scarlet and Violet PSA 10 population, and I think about how the market at some point is going to cool down, like collector interest will wane or supply is going to increase. And either way, if supply increases so that we're not in this delta anymore, I think that no matter what, some people are just going to leave the hobby. If scalpers can't make money, they're going to leave, and I cannot wait for that day to happen. I'm so tired of this stuff. It's nonsense. I have people at work all the time who are like, how do I get this at MSRP? And I feel bad for them. I want everybody to be able to get it at MSRP. So I hope that happens. But as that starts to happen, when we have these higher than ever seen PSA 10 populations of some of these amazing cards, like, is the value going to remain there? Are these prices going to stay incredibly high? And if they are, does that mean that the Sword and Shield PSA 10s right now, with a much, much smaller population, are those going to be fantastic buys? I mean, think about the Machamp from Astral Radiance, right? The raw card right now is $136. PSA 10 is going for $470. Like, to me, that just seems like a fantastic long-term opportunity if the Pokemon market remains strong and if demand, even though it might wane some, but in the future will increase again. Like, if that happens, that could be a fantastic opportunity. The Charizard from Brilliant Stars, I think Brilliant Stars is a fantastic set. The PSA 10 coming in at sub $800. I mean, when you think about all of these things, it's just incredible. And it is awesome to keep our eyes on it. It's awesome to keep a finger on the pulse on. And again, I don't know what's going to happen. You can drop something down in the comments below if you have a thought, but I don't think we're in the middle of, I don't know, what I would call a trash grading era where just all of a sudden all of these cards are going to be graded. In the long run, they're going to be worth nothing. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I would not be surprised if we see the gains either slow down quite a bit or even flatten out just for a little while. So we'll have to see what happens. I promise you I will do my best to keep a finger on the pulse. I hope this information was helpful. I hope it was fun. That was the whole point of this video, was to do a fun, transparent conversation about PSA 10 pricing and population. And I promise to do more. I will continue to dig in this. I will continue to bring you more content. And if you had fun, if you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up or hit that subscribe button. Those things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I hope you have an epic one, and I'll talk to you soon. See you later, everybody. Bye.